What's happening? A happy hump day to you and yours. Thanks for joining us. As always, it is much appreciated. We'll get to Jerod Mayo and his future in a couple of minutes, but I want to start off with some news. Jaylen Poke is in the concussion protocol per Jerod Mayo. So Poke in the concussion protocol was not at practice today. I think many of us would agree that Jaylen needs a week off, even without the concussion stuff. He needs at least a week off. He needs to reset. The drops, he falls to the ground during the 2-point conversion attempt in London last weekend. I think it is best for everybody involved for Jaylen Poke to get a week off. So maybe this concussion protocol will force the Patriots' hands to make sure he gets this week off. But I think it is in the best interest for Poke, the best interest for everybody, that he gets at least 1 week off, because he certainly needs it. He needs a mental reset. This stuff happens during rookie seasons, and I'd like to see him get a week or two off, come back, re-energized, figure out what's going on, and look like the Jaylen Poke that we expected. Because the one thing about Jaylen at Washington was he had great hands. He's always had great hands. And if you talk to a lot of people, they would also tell you that he has great character. So this is adversity, and he needs to face it, overcome it, and become the receiver that I think he can become in the NFL. If he doesn't do that, he will go down as another lost draft pick by this football team. Meanwhile, other wide receivers spoke to the media today, and they had a lot to say. Phil Perry posted a long thread on KJ Osborne and what Osborne said to the media. Of course, you go back to Sunday. Osborne gets the touchdown catch. He does the call me celebration in the end zone. He then posts his back and forth between he and his agent on social media about how he wasn't supposed to play on Sunday, etc., etc. So the question to Osborne: do you want to be traded? Osborne, quote, "This is where I am. This is the place that I signed to be. A lot of things are out of my control, but I like to be where my feet are. Today I'm here. We'll just kind of rock with it as it goes." That is not the most heartfelt commitment to a football team that I've read. Seems like he's not thrilled. When he was asked about how frustrating it is to be on a team focused on developing young guys, Osborne said, "It's extremely difficult. It's frustrating. A lot of that stuff is not in my control. The organization is going to do what's best for them. I would say for us." Nice little them versus us slip of the tongue. So is he already looking like he's outside of this organization when he is thinking about himself and what's going on? I would also say Osborne, unless the Patriots did not sit him down and they weren't upfront with him, it was pretty obvious what this football team was going to look like, right? I mean, they signed Osborne a little bit later in free agency. I would imagine many people thought they would go younger at wide receiver. When they signed Jacoby Brissett, for example, they told Brissett, "We're going to draft a quarterback, and we're going to move to that quarterback eventually." Did they not have that conversation with Osborne and or his representation when they signed him to a contract? It's a 1-year deal. So I'd be very surprised if the Patriots did not give Osborne at least an idea that they were going to go younger at wide receiver, and there might be a numbers game as the season went on. Osborne added he wants to coach up the young players. Well, he's not doing so by example off the field, but I guess it's a nice sentiment. Osborne said his TD celebration was a call to God celebration that he's done before. Okay, fine. If that's what he says it is, that's what it is. Not going to lose my mind over a touchdown celebration. Osborne acknowledged frustration, but said his recent IG post was not intended to show that things have been difficult here. Said it was more about motivation, inspiration, that he's always ready. I asked this of KJ Osborne: would you have posted what you posted if it wasn't for your frustration? So the post might not be a sign directly that you are frustrated, but it certainly stems off the feeling of frustration, right? Some might think that's playing semantics. I don't. There's obviously a frustration level with Osborne. He wants to play more. He expected to play more. Was he promised that he was going to play more? I find that hard to believe. But I understand a guy who's on a 1-year deal looking to stay in the NFL. He's not getting snaps or as many as he wanted to. He's not getting as much opportunity. He had to play with Jacoby Brissett for the first month or so of the season. I mean, the clock is ticking. If he continues to have a season like he's having, then his free agency stock is going to take a huge hit. And his stock isn't that high to begin with because he's KJ Osborne. So he's certainly feeling the pressure professionally, looking at his contract, understanding his situation, and probably saying to himself, I'm going to walk right back into free agency being a non-factor for a bad football team. Obviously, that's not what he wants. So I understand the frustration to a point. Then he was asked again, does he want to stay with the Patriots? Does he want to be with the Patriots? And Osborne said, of course, man. This is what I signed up for. The rest is not up to me. I'm where my feet are. Today I'm here. If that changes, that's not really in my control. So I guess you would say more commitment the second time around than the first time around. When he was asked if he wanted to be traded, he said, this is where I am. This is the place that I signed to be. We'll just kind of rock with as it goes. And then he was asked later on, and he said, yeah, of course, this is where I want to be. A little wishy-washy on the commitment. Was Osborne surprised when he was told he'd be inactive last week? Hell yeah. It's different. This year has been different. I feel like I've been a solid player in this league. It's kind of something that we're working through right now. We will see. I agree with Osborne. I mean, he is right on this. He has been a solid player in the league. He's obviously not chipping in as much as he wants to. Had a touchdown catch against the Jaguars. Maybe that gets him going. Maybe Poke being in the concussion protocol, if he doesn't play this weekend, that gets more snaps for Osborne, and maybe he produces with those snaps. I would say he was very up and down during camp. It's not like he knocked everybody's socks off. He was dropping the football every once in a while. So he didn't have the greatest camp. He got better as camp went on. But we'll see. We'll see if this impacts his playing time at all. I think what will impact it more is Poke's situation versus the coaching staff all of a sudden waking up on Sunday before they play the Jets, saying to themselves collectively, we've got to get KJ Osborne more snaps. Osborne wasn't the only wide receiver that spoke to the media. Again, we'll get to Jerod Mayo in a minute. Kayshon Boutte spoke to the media. And this is from Taylor Kyles of CLNS. He posted that Boutte said he had to ask for both deep shots he was targeted on the past 2 weeks, which he notes shouldn't have to happen, given he hasn't dropped the pass this season. I love this. So number one, Boutte's like, yeah, the 2 deep passes that I got, I actually had to ask the coaches to get those passes thrown to me. Is that how this works? You have players going up to Alex Van Pelt, giving him ideas during the game. Remember, Ramondre Stevenson said that early in the season, I think it was week 1, that he went to AVP and said, hey, let's scrap the inside zone stuff. Let's run duo. Are the offensive players giving the offensive coordinator ideas during the game because the offensive coordinator has no idea what to call? That's at least what's being thrown out there with Kayshon Boutte. Yeah, I had to tell the coaches to throw deep shots to me, or I would not get those shots. I also love the fact that Boutte says, and I will remind all of you that I have not dropped the pass this season, so I should not have to ask the coaches to throw the football to me. This wide receiver room right now is a mess. You got all the Poke issues. You've got Osborne frustrated. Boutte's telling the coaches what to call and saying that he shouldn't have to tell the coaches what to call and that he should be getting the football anyway. Earth to Tyler Hughes, wide receivers coach. What are we doing? Are you having any conversations that are worth anything in this world with any of these guys? Tyquan Underwood, what are we doing? Assistant receivers coach who played in the league. Can we get your group settled down, please? Jerod Mayo, what are we doing? Why is your wide receiver room constantly squawking, posting stuff on social media? Can somebody, anybody, whether it's Mayo or Hughes or Underwood, will somebody sit these guys down and say, how about you just focus on playing football? I think that would be a great idea. All right, we're going to get to Jerod Mayo now. Before we do, want to remind you a couple things you can do to help the program. Costs you no money. Doesn't take a lot of time at all. Just click that thumbs up on the YouTube channel, please. I would appreciate it. We all would appreciate it. More thumbs means more likes. More likes means more eyeballs. That's how we beat the YouTube algorithm. We sidekick it to the face. So don't forget to give us that thumbs up. Also, don't forget to throw a comment in. How do you feel about KJ Osborne and what he had to say? How about Kayshon Boutte telling Alex Van Pelt and the coaches, hey, throw the football to me deep. And by the way, I shouldn't be asking about this because I haven't dropped the pass all year. How about you give me the football? How do you feel about the wide receiver room? Also, how do you feel about Jerod Mayo? Like, comment. Those two things will help us beat that algorithm. Also, subscribe. We're trying to get to 5,000 subscribers before Thanksgiving. We are over 4,600 right now. Let's continue that push. So like, comment, subscribe, and of course, rate and review my friends at Spotify and Apple Pods. All right, Jerod Mayo. Could Jerod Mayo get popped before the 2025 season? Could he get popped after game 17 this year? Could Robert Kraft make the decision, you know what, Jerod, we messed up. We made a mistake. You are not ready for this. We have to go into a different direction for 2025. Could that happen? Would the Patriots do it? Of course, it could happen. Anything could happen. But would the Patriots, would Robert Kraft actually pull the trigger on Mayo after one season as the head coach? What do you think? Throw a comment in. Let me know how you feel. Greg Bedard, my buddy, did a podcast with him yesterday. We were taping that podcast. And during said podcast, Bedard, before he went to Felgerd Maz, said to me that it was actually something that could happen. That Robert Kraft could decide to say goodbye to Jerod Mayo after one season as the head coach if it continues to go this badly. Could he be gone? Yes, as I said, anything is possible. But here's what we have to talk about. What would have to happen for Mayo to get canned? Like, what would have to happen for Robert Kraft to say, we've had enough, we're moving on from Jerod Mayo? How bad would it have to get? How ugly would things have to look before Kraft made that decision? I got a couple of ideas. Number one, if this team fails to improve for the rest of the season, you have 10 more games on the schedule. If we are talking about the same problems, week 13, week 14, week 16, if we're talking about the same damn issues with this football team and the same issues from the coaching staff, if it's Groundhog's Day, one of my favorite movies with Bill Murray, if it's Groundhog's Day and we keep waking up, listening to Sonny and Cher, punching our alarm clocks, if we're doing that in week 15, week 16, then I do think the door is open for Kraft to say, you know what, Jerod, I appreciate you, I love you, but adios. If there is no team improvement, if the young guys are not showing improvement, if Jaylen Poke doesn't get through what he's going through right now, if they don't get their young offensive linemen healthy back on the field and get them producing somewhat, if Javon Baker doesn't get on the football field this year, if Jaheim Bell, when given a chance, doesn't look lost like he looked lost on Sunday, is there any improvement from the young players? Drake Maye, I think, improved from his first start to his second start. Does Maye continue to improve? That's a big question. Discipline. Does this team look more disciplined as the year goes on? Less penalty flags on the field. Off the field, is there less squawking? Less issues with the police? Less issues with the media? So do the young guys improve? Does the discipline improve? As the season goes on, does this team actually look competitive? You know, I thought this team would be bad. I said they were going to win 5 games. They would have a top 3 to 5 pick in the NFL draft. I thought that they would beat Jacksonville. I was wrong on that. I thought they would beat Seattle. I was wrong on that. Was not surprised by the Cincinnati win to start the year. But I did not expect this team to be very good. But I did expect this team to compete. And that is the worst thing about this season so far. They're not even competitive. Defensively, they are not competitive. You add Drake Maye to the equation on the offensive side of the football, and you're going against one of the worst defenses in football, the worst pass defense in football. You score 10 points on your first 2 drives, and then you score 6 points the rest of the game. They are not competitive right now. And that's the most infuriating part of this. I think many of you would be okay if they were competing and still sitting at 1-6. But this idea of 1-6 and not competing whatsoever for the last few weeks, is so damn frustrating. So do we see this team start competing? Do they lose on Sunday, but it's a tight game? Do they lose games by a single possession, a single score? Or is it the same old, and they're getting their asses handed to them? It's got to be somewhat competitive. Does the operation improve? If the operation doesn't improve, and it looks like the way it's looked throughout the first 7 games of the season, then how can you sit there and stand by the coach? Generally speaking, the next 10 games, by the end of the year, do we feel good with where Jerod Mayo is, where his staff is, where the team is headed? What's the trajectory look like? If there's no improvement from right now to week 17, week 18, then yes, I could believe that Kraft would pull the trigger and say goodbye to Jerod Mayo. Secondly, if the team goes further off the rails, if you have more off the field stuff happening, if you have more arrests, if you have more issues with law enforcement, if you have more issues on social media, if you have guys continue to talk on the radio, in the locker room, calling other guys out, fingers pointing everywhere, if there is more of this to come, then I could see Robert Kraft saying goodbye to Jerod Mayo. If Mayo loses the room, a couple weeks ago, Evan Lazar said, and it wasn't a report, it was Evan's opinion, and he came back and said, I might have gone a little too far, but he talked about the locker room teetering on a mutiny. If you feel as this season goes on that they are teetering towards a mutiny, then I don't know how you keep the head coach. So if the operation on the field doesn't get better, the young guys don't improve, they're not more competitive as a football team. If off the field it's further off the rails, law enforcement, social media, guys talking too much, saying ridiculous things, if it feels like this is borderline a mutiny, then Robert Kraft has to do the responsible thing and look at the head coach and say, you weren't good enough. But it's not just on the players. You see, Jerod Mayo wants to be a CEO. And he has been a CEO head coach so far. You know what that means? He doesn't get too involved, right? I mean, you would see Belichick back in the day, and he'd have the board, and he'd be talking to the defensive lineman. He'd be looking through the pictures, flipping through the pictures, and trying to see what's going on. He'd have his little pencil. He'd be writing things down. He'd be talking to the staff. He'd be talking to the quarterback. Jerod Mayo, CEO Jerod Mayo so far, is kind of just letting everybody do what they do. And in theory, it would be fine if you had an experienced staff and things were going well. You don't have an experienced staff at what they're doing, and things are not going well last I checked. So I want to look at the staff improvement. Is Jerod Mayo improving? Is Van Pelt improving? Is Covington improving? Is Springer improving? Are the assistants under those guys improving? Because that's on Jerod Mayo. If you're going to be a CEO, you got to make sure that your coordinators and your coaching staff continues to improve. So is the coaching staff improving? If Covington and Van Pelt don't improve, if we see the same stuff happening through the first 7 weeks, happening the next 7 weeks, then there's a major issue. And Mayo is not doing a good enough job with his coordinators, his assistants, to get through to them. And he's not doing a good enough job to help them out as the head coach. The Mayo CEO role. So if you see lack of improvement on the field, lack of development from the young players, things away from the field, further going off the rails, coaching staff not improving, Mayo not improving. Is Mayo getting more involved? Is he putting more defensive input into the equation to help out Covington? Or do we continue to see teams run the football for 100,000 yards every Sunday against this run defense as Covington stands there and picks his nose and does nothing about it? Are we seeing the same things? We've seen a lot of that, right? We've seen a lot of the repeat mistakes. And remember, Jerod Mayo told all of us, I am not a repeat offender. He has been a repeat offender through the first 7 weeks of this season, over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. Do we see more sideline coaching? Do we see more of that? All right, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Continue to help this podcast out, grow the audience. Let's jump to a few super chats, and then I will tell you whether or not if I think Mayo will be let go. Louise, is it my impression or Mayo tries to be like Dan Campbell, coach and personality-wise, ends up being like Urban Meyer? Oh, my God. During his Jags tenure. I don't know if Mayo's walking around kicking anybody. Remember that story? I don't know if he's as bad as Urban Meyer, but he certainly hasn't been much better than Urban Meyer. It does feel that way, Louise. Here's the thing. When Mayo went through, all the introductory press conferences and stuff, there was a lack of substance from Mayo. And he was criticized by many people for that at the time. I didn't have a huge issue with it because if you watch a lot of introductory press conferences for coaches don't say a lot. It's more of a like, I'm happy to be here. And they generally lay out like, I want our team to be tough and I want our team to be smart. And so I didn't criticize Mayo that much about his introductory press conferences. There was a lack of substance. There was a lack of detail. But I chalked that up to business as usual with introductory press conferences. But now as the season has gone on, and we're 7 weeks in, we're heading to week 8 this Sunday against the Jets, there still is not enough substance from Jerod Mayo. And that's a problem. It's obviously a problem. He doesn't have to be a walking, talking football encyclopedia like Bill Belichick. But he also has to be more of what he's been. He's got to do more than what he's done. And the lack of substance is now translating to the football field. And that's a problem. Thank you for the super chat, Louise. It is much appreciated. $50 super chat. Let's go to Vitalix with a $5 super chat. I saw the Jets had a shortened practice. Even the Jets on a losing streak are looking past the Patriots. Simple, not good enough all around. Well, I think the Jets had a shortened practice because, again, they don't forget they had a primetime game this last weekend. Aaron Rodgers is banged up. It came out today that he's got a hamstring problem. He's got a couple of other things bothering him. So it might be more management than anything else in New York. We'll have to see. We'll have to see if they go hard tomorrow, whatever the case may be. They also have a new head coach, interim, Jeff Albrick, trying to figure things out there. So the Jets are pretty messy. I mean, I think you should feel better as a Patriots fan because at least you knew the Patriots weren't going to be very good. At least you knew the Patriots were going to go through a rebuild. The Jets are all in, and they're 2-5, and they're a little bit messy right now. Greg Fields jumps in. $20 super chat. Thank you, Greg. If you want to jump to the front of the line with a comment or a question, you can throw a super chat in. I think Kraft expected Belichick would train and hand off the team in much better shape, and clearly that did not happen. I want Mayo to succeed, but we need some sort of change. I think first and foremost, this was a year ahead of schedule. If you look at the Belichick contract situation, I believe Kraft was hoping that Belichick would right the ship last year. It wouldn't be a lost cause. They'd have another year to kind of season Jerod Mayo, and it wouldn't get as, cluttered. And it got cluttered. It was a bad season in every way. I don't know if Belichick knew of Jerod Mayo's contract. I would imagine he did. And that's another reason why the Kraft thing was a terrible idea, to put it into the contract of Jerod Mayo that he would be the next head coach, because as soon as Belichick found that out, what do you think Belichick's thinking? Why do you think the Greg Bedard report came out last year about how the coaches were kind of looking at Jerod Mayo differently? And Jerod Mayo was walking around the building like he pretty much owned the place. That's how some coaches felt. That was their perception of Jerod. I'm sure the contract situation and him being handed the head coaching gig in his contract, I'm sure that did not help how coaches in that building looked at Mayo last year. So Bill Belichick, who is struggling through a tough season, and he's got Jerod Mayo underneath him, Mayo knows he's going to be the next guy. You don't think Belichick was a little annoyed? You don't think he was a little paranoid even? So it started there. And I think in Kraft's mind, here's the issue. Kraft's plan would have worked out if everything went flawlessly. In Kraft's brain, I think he believed Belichick will be fine this year. We'll get it back on track. He'll beat Shula's record. He'll retire on top of the world. We will be able to transition Jerod Mayo in as the next head coach. Bill will still be able to mentor him. There won't be any hard feelings. Rose-colored glasses is the way Kraft was looking at this situation when he decided to give Mayo that contract stipulation that he would be the next guy. It was rose-colored glasses. He didn't think about what happens if the season is lost. What happens if Belichick wins 4 games? What if I've got to fire Belichick? Is Jerod Mayo ready? Does Jerod Mayo have a network? Does Jerod Mayo have enough of this staff that is going to be behind him that he can keep them? He didn't think of any of that. Or if he did, he just kept answering those questions in positive terms. And then last year was a dumpster fire. You let Belichick go, and you put Mayo in place too early, I believe, and you were stuck with it. Not a good idea. Anonymous, $5 super chat. I guess I should hold this till Friday, but gosh, if we could beat the Jets, that could turn things around. Could. A win would be very, very nice. A win would be fantastic. Thank you for the 5, Anonymous. All right, let's get back to Jerod Mayo. Do I think Jerod Mayo goes? No. I don't think Jerod Mayo will get fired. I don't think he will get fired after one season. I don't think that Robert Kraft is going to willingly take all of that egg on the face. This goes back to Kraft. This goes back to the decision I just talked about. He was the guy that put Mayo in charge, and he has not had a good explanation as to why. He told Karen Garigi, and I know everybody's talking about that sideline interview with Kraft on Amazon going back to week 3 against the Jets. Karen Garigian had that story before Amazon had that story, before Robert Kraft said anything. Shout out to Karen. She's an OG on the beat. Karen Garigian was the one that got Kraft on record saying that in 2019, he saw Mayo as the next head coach. And he saw Mayo as the next head coach because they had a great trip to Israel. And then Mayo had some kind of, meeting of the minds at the airport and led a think tank session pretty much with everybody that was on the trip. And that's what sold Kraft on Mayo being the next head coach. Even though Mayo had not coached a down of football in his life at that point, that's why Robert thought it was a great idea to make the next head coach. So Kraft knows. If Mayo fails, if they fire Mayo after year 1, and they chose him to replace the greatest coach of all time, Robert Kraft knows for a fact everything is going to be thrown back at him, and it should. He deserves all the criticism. If this ends up, as it's been through the first 7 weeks, and it is an utter disaster for this organization, it goes on Kraft. This is Robert Kraft's fault. 100%, full stop. Because hiring Jerod Mayo, that fakakta contract condition, that was the beginning. That was the beginning of all of this. And then all of it rolls downhill from there. Robert Kraft knows that. Kraft knows if he fires Mayo after year 1, it's on him. And I don't know about you, but there are not a lot of NFL owners that are willing to take the egg on the face. There are not a lot of NFL owners that come out and admit that they made mistakes. Not really how those guys operate. So Kraft always talks about patience, right? He talks about patience, measuring 9 times before cutting on the 10th. He talks about all of those things, right? He talks all of those things about, it takes time, it takes patience. We develop. I think it goes against everything that Robert Kraft feels with every fiber of his being to fire Jerod Mayo after year 1. So I don't think Kraft will do it. Why do you think Kraft is talking about rebuild? Why do you think Kraft is talking about all of a sudden, how the expectations have been lowered? That he doesn't know what this season is going to look like, but he feels like the team is going in the right direction. Everything that he has said through the early stages of this season is to protect himself and Jerod Mayo in case this continues to be an atrocity. If this team finishes with 1 win, 2 wins, 3 wins, Kraft is going to go back to these comments and say, hey, look, we knew this was going to be rough. I told you at the beginning of the year that we didn't know what to expect, what to anticipate, et cetera, et cetera. It's a young staff, but we feel good about where these guys are going, and I still believe in Jerod Mayo. It was all to set that up later in the year if they failed to improve. The rebuild talk, it's a 2-year timeline, 2 to 3 year timeline. And Kraft can always go back to that to protect Mayo. I'd also say if Mayo doesn't lose the room, it is tough on players and the operation overall to reboot yet again because you just rebooted. And if you reboot again, I'm telling you right now, if you reboot again, you better get it right. You better get it right. If you obviously swung and missed on Mayo, if it's at the end of the year and you decide to pull the trigger and fire him, you best get that next hire right. I don't know if it's going to get Mike Vrabel, who I would have picked over Mayo. I said it during the offseason. I would have gone after Vrabel. He's got the experience. He's got the network, et cetera, et cetera. You better get that next hire right, because if you don't, that's how bad teams stay bad teams for a decade, 15 years. So do I think Mayo goes? No, I do not think Robert Kraft will fire Jerod Mayo. Should he fire Jerod Mayo? If there is no or little improvement, the answer is yes. If there is very little improvement or no improvement at all, then I would be looking for a new head coach. If we're seeing the same mistakes week 15, 16, 17 that we saw weeks 5, 6, and 7, then yes. Mike Vrabel, still available. Yeah, he's got this gig in Cleveland or whatever, but I can guarantee you the Browns know, Vrabel knows, that is a bridge, quote-unquote, deal, okay? Vrabel doesn't want to be an advisor or an assistant to a club for the next 15 years. He wants to be a head coach. And that was to keep him in the league. That was to keep him getting paid, continue to work, go to a different kind of system, work with different people. But if Vrabel is going to be looking at head coaching gigs, and I would be shocked if Mike Vrabel is not hired in this upcoming offseason, in this upcoming cycle, then if I were Robert Kraft, I would pick up that phone. If I've seen no to little improvement from this football team and this coaching staff and this head coach, I would be picking up that phone and I would be calling Mike Vrabel. Absolutely. Because the worst thing that you can do is limp into 2025 with no signs of improvement from your coach and from your coaching staff. It's the worst idea. It's the worst thing you could do. So, yeah, I'm picking up the phone. I'm calling Mike Vrabel. He's my first phone call immediately if there's little to no improvement. Jerod Mayo needs to earn this job for year 2. I would argue that Mayo did not really earn the job to begin with, right? He was never a coordinator. He was chosen in 2019 to be the next head coach from the owner when he hadn't coached a down of football yet. He didn't earn this job by, coaching up the ranks and becoming that guy. So he needs to earn year 2. He needs to earn year 2 to me, just like everybody else. You need to earn year 2. If you're a head coach and you fail and you're trying to get your gig for the next year, you've got to tell me why. You've got to show me why. You've got to prove to me why. The other hires, those other guys in the league, some of those other guys too, they didn't earn a head coaching gig. I'm not saying Mayo's the only one, but when you're a head coach for the first time ever and you've never been a coordinator, and we find out some of the things that we've found out with Kraft, in 2019 making that decision, then I need to see something from Jerod Mayo. I said this on Monday's podcast. I am not unreasonable, folks. I'm not expecting Jerod Mayo to walk into the building and be a really good head coach from day one, okay? If you watch or listen to this podcast, I think you know by now, I try to be as reasonable as possible. Yes, I'll lose my mind every once in a while. We all do, out of frustration. But I'm not asking a lot from Jerod Mayo. But if he fails to improve, if we're watching the clock mismanagement, if we have guys still talking to the media about certain things, if we've got them going to social media, if we have them getting in trouble off the field, if the offense and defense both look lost and special teams recently, I mean, Jerod Mayo has to give Robert Kraft a reason to keep him. He's got to show some kind of improvement. And if he doesn't, I don't know why you would bring him back for year two. The only reason why you would bring him back is just out of hope. Because, again, it's too personal for Robert. And he thought he was right in 2019. And as he told the media, I'm going with my gut. And he wants to stand by his gut. Like, you got to show me some kind of improvement here. Some kind of improvement. You've got to earn that job for year two. Why would I believe anything would change in year two if there is no or very little improvement from week 1 to week 18 of this season? If we're seeing the same old week in and week out, and we get to, week 18 and this team is making the same kinds of mistakes, what are we doing by bringing Jerod Mayo back? You have Mike Vrabel as an option. I'm going to that. Why would you believe anything's going to change? All right, let's jump to a couple of super chats. Don't forget, as you watch, as you listen, to like, comment, and subscribe. Doesn't cost you any money. Doesn't cost you much time, but it helps this podcast an awful lot. The thumbs up on the YouTube channel helps us. The comments help us. Would you give Jerod Mayo more than 1 year if this team showed no to little improvement on the field, off the field? The coaching is a mess. I wouldn't. I would ask, why would you? So throw a comment in and subscribe. Trying to hit 5,000 subscribers. All right, let's go to, I believe it's Terry. Terry with a $20 super chat. Thank you, Terry. Welcome home at Maryland. Oh, Maryland's home. Welcome home, Maryland. Hope you enjoyed your trip. Africa, Paris. Look at you traveling around the world. I drove down to Virginia for a week. I loved it, but it's not quite Africa or Paris. So I hope you enjoyed your travels. The only positive I can think of this week with this team. Terry, thank you for the $20 super chat. As always, it is much appreciated. Kelso jumps in, $5 super chat. Our owner will do nothing. I'll waste the rest of the season on fire Mayo now and start the rebuilding now. See, I wouldn't, Kelso, I get the frustration, but I'm not firing a guy 7 weeks in. I'm not firing Jerod Mayo 7 weeks in. I'm not. I mean, I got to give him at least a full season to show that he can improve. I'm not firing a guy like 2 months into a season. I think that would be an overreaction. I mean, you made him the head coach. I would not pull the trigger 7 weeks in. A lot going on as a head coach. You want to look at the coordinators, I'm going to talk about Alex Van Pelt on Friday. You want to talk about the coordinators, if they're not showing any improvement, then I could see some changes as the season goes on. But the head coach, that's a huge move. And 7 weeks in, as bad as it's been, I would not go there. I would not go there. And if you fire Jerod Mayo that quickly, I think a lot of people around the league would look at Robert Kraft and they would be wondering, okay, I'm going to go work for you when you just fired the guy after 7 weeks. I would not do that. I don't think that would be a wise move. Let's see how all of this unfolds over the next 10 weeks. I think you got to give him at least a year. Chris Chapman, I want to see a coaching change for Sunday. Mayo takes over the defense. So I don't know about taking over the defense, Chris, but I do really like the idea of Mayo having more to say. Now, I asked Greg Bedard this on the podcast him and I recorded yesterday. I asked if he had heard if Mayo was involved a little bit more than we think, especially on the defensive side. And Bedard said he wasn't quite sure. He has to get more information from people that he has to talk to this week. But his feeling of kind of what he's heard a little bit and what he has seen, his feeling is that Mayo has been completely the CEO kind of coach. And I think that has to stop. I think it's time for Mayo to get into the defensive meetings, to get into that room, to work on the game plan with Covington like he did with Steve Belichick on Sundays, be more involved on the sidelines with the defense. I think it's time for a little bit more help, a lifeline, so to speak, from Mayo to Covington, because what's been going on the first 7 weeks obviously has not helped, and it's not working. So I do think Mayo should have more input and be more involved on the defensive side of the football. And if it means you got to bring McAdoo down and make McAdoo a little bit more involved with the offense, by all means do it. I mean, the way things have gone, I'm all for looking at tweaks. If it's Mayo working with Covington hand in hand, being more involved on the defense, fine. If it's bringing McAdoo down and helping Van Pelt and being more involved with the offense, fine. Because if this continues, it's time for Alex Van Pelt and DeMarcus Covington to swallow any kind of ego that they may have and accept that help and understand that they haven't been good enough. So I'm all for Mayo having more say on the defense. Taking over, I wouldn't go there just yet. All right, let's end on a high note. And by the way, I see Marilyn in there throwing in some chats. Glad to see her back. 7 weeks went by way too quick, she says. All right, let's end this podcast on a high note. Let's talk about Drake Maye. Greg Bedard is the toughest grader that I know, and I thought it would be good to tell all of you Greg Bedard and what he had to write about Drake Maye, what he saw on Sunday compared to what he saw against the Texans. Here's what Bedard wrote. Maye had Bedard's 6th best graded Patriots quarterback game of the past 2 seasons. So what we saw on Sunday, according to Greg's grades, that was the 6th best game that we've seen from a quarterback since the beginning of 2023. You will ask, what are the other 5? Greg gives us the answer. Week 1, Jacoby Brissett against Cincy. You had Bailey Zappi at Denver. That was a win last year. Mac Jones, weeks 1 through 3. People will never forget this. I mean, they'll never remember this. They'll never admit this. But the first 3 weeks of last year, Mac Jones was actually pretty good. And then it went just absolutely off the rails after that point. But Mac Jones, weeks 1 through 3, which was 1 win and 2 close losses, those were graded well. And then you have Drake Maye in there. Maye's EPA per dropback was the Patriots' highest since Mac in that win against the Bills last year. We should all remember that one because there were only 4 wins, and that was the most memorable. Plus plays for Drake Maye. Plus plays went from 11 to 14. So Drake Maye had 14 plus plays, according to Bedard's grading system. His minus plays went from 17 to 11. So he improved. He was a +3 on the plus plays, and he was 6 less on the minus plays. Maye was also much more consistent with a 7-5 split in the first half, a 7-6 split in the second half when it comes to plus minus. And Bedard writes, to be fair, 2 came in desperation time. Bedard writes, Maye only departed the pocket early once. It was good to see him take that coaching. And his expected completion percentage difference increased from -1.8 to 2.9 on the plus side, an illustration that his accuracy overall was a little better from week 1, which was another good step. Maye's expected points added per drop back ranked 6th in the league after Sunday. He was 25th against the Texans. Maye was also 4th in the league in passer rating against pressure on Sunday. He was 13th against Houston. So all of these are improvements. All of these are improvements that you see. Bedard writes, Maye took the coaching, studied the film, and applied all those lessons. He's obviously a quick study, so that's a great sign. Imagine if he had any semblance of a running game. And I talked about that on Monday, and I think some people have glossed over it. Think about the circumstances that Drake Maye was dealing with in London. He had absolutely no run game to speak of. He had another offensive line change when Layden Robinson had to leave and City So came in, and City So was not good on Sunday. His top receiver in Pop Douglas was ill, so he wasn't playing a ton. His snaps were limited. He's in London for the first time as a professional football player. Different schedule, right? Different clock, body clock, all of that, the travel. And he's going through all of this. His offensive play caller was not doing a good job after the initial script, where I thought was very good from Van Pelt. The first 12 to 15 plays I thought were fantastic. It's crazy. I heard Andrew Callahan say this. Did you know that in the script, like the first drive or whatever, there were 4 play-action passes from Drake Maye? In the rest of the game, there were 4 play-action passes? That's insane. It's insane. You see that play action is working. You scripted it, and then you hardly called it the rest of the game. Let's get back to the good stuff, though. The adversity that Drake Maye had to overcome on Sunday, we should not overlook that. Bedard continues to be very impressed by Maye's level-headedness and toughness. He's hanging in the pocket and feels the pressure. If he could just tighten up his motion in pop time, in baseball terms, he would be really dangerous. So that was Greg Bedard, who gave pretty high marks to Drake Maye. I know yesterday when we were recording the podcast, Bedard said that he gave Maye, I think it was a B. And of course, the first week against Houston, he gave Maye a C-. So a pretty big jump from the first start to the second start. See a couple things here. KJ Bop, I don't know. Why Vrabel and not Ben Johnson? Ben Johnson could certainly be somebody that you look at for sure. He's going to be near the top of the list. I don't know if Ben Johnson would want to come to New England if he's sold on Drake Maye, maybe. But Ben Johnson had a lot of opportunity the last 2 off seasons and didn't jump to be a head coach. So does he want to be a head coach? I would think he does, but it also seems like he's looking for the perfect situation. I don't know if New England gives that to Ben Johnson. I don't know if he does that. I see some people being out on Vrabel. Look, I did a podcast on Vrabel last offseason. You can check it out. I went through why I was into the idea. Lots of reasons why I would absolutely be looking at Mike Vrabel as an option to be the next head coach if there's no to little improvement here from this team the next 10 weeks. Next 10 games on this schedule, if you see no to little improvement, if I'm Robert Kraft, I'm making the move. Just think about Drake Maye. Think about Drake Maye, and if you're a Celtics fan, think about opening night last night. Hoo-ha! What a freaking opening night that was. Tatum's shot looked pretty good. All right, tomorrow night, 7 p.m. live, Crafts and Kickoffs, my NFL podcast on this YouTube channel. If you want to have a beverage, I'll have a craft beer and talk football with all of you. Swing by tomorrow night at 7 p.m. live right here on this channel, Crafts and Kickoffs. Friday at 3 p.m. we go live. I want to talk about Alex Van Pelt. Could this weekend be Alex Van Pelt's last shot as the offensive coordinator? I want to talk about that on Friday, and I want to preview the Jets game as well. That'll be at 3 o'clock right at this channel. Until then, enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy the rest of your day. This has been the Nick Cattle Show. I appreciate every single one of you. Like, comment, and subscribe.